You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Folks, Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. The only sings and that makes official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as the rest of the world. We're the oldest broadcasting podcast in the world. And we have the most amazing guests as well. So be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet.
Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind.
Today's featured author is brought to you by Majestic Authors Media, specializing in strategic marketing and publishing to help authors reach their ideal audience and maximize their book success, turning powerful messages into global impact, one story at a time. Today, an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his book called Is He or Isn't He? A Response to God's Not Dead by Cliff Summers. We're going to end it with him and find out all the deets there. He is a wonderful gentleman, a young man joining us today, and we're going to be talking to him about that book. He is a former U.S. Army Special Forces soldier and JAG officer who served as a prosecutor and military judge. He later practiced as a board-certified civil trial lawyer and Florida Supreme Court certified mediator in Tampa. He was involved in the nationally known U.S. versus McDonald murder case, which later featured an FX television series. He is now the author of a nonfiction and poetry books and lives with his wife, Jenny, in Citrus Park, Florida. Welcome to the show, Cliff. How are you, sir?
I am well.
Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
I'm on the web at cliffsummersmessageman.com.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book?
Is He or Isn't He is, as it says, a response to the book God's Not Dead. And that book is subtitled Evidence for God in an Uncertain Age. And my book is about why there is not a single shred of evidence in that book, and people should not be misled by the title or the approach.
All right. And so your summation of what you put in the book basically revolves around, is he or isn't he dead? God being specific. Give us some more depth in this book and what it's about.
The author of God's Not Dead is a Protestant minister named Rice Brooks. And Pastor Brooks has set forth in his book a series of arguments that he says amount to evidence supporting the existence of God. And it includes things like going back to the watchmaker approach, to things like the tuned universe or irreducible complexity. Those are all arguments that are made regularly on behalf of the people known very well as creationists or intelligent design folks, who take the position that these arguments will support evidence for God. I'm not trying to prove that there is no God, because you can't prove a negative. It's not possible. But it is, in my view, also not possible to prove that there is. And I've always been interested in that proposition. So I read his book hoping that he would show me some evidence. And because I'm a trial lawyer, the word evidence attracted me, because I've read a lot of books on this subject. So I wanted to know, what is the evidence that could support the proposition that there is a God, not only a God, but as the pastor would have it, an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, eternal, personal God.
Huh?
And that's a load of stuff to have to prove.
Yeah, it is a lot of stuff to prove. Now, what research did you do in the book to make this all happen?
I read his book several times. I annotated his book. I read several books by both pro and con, the creationist point of view. Particularly, I read a book by a fellow named Bart Ehrman, who's a professor of religion at the University of North Carolina. And I read several books of the Bible several times, and I read the Gospels, which I comment on in the book.
Oh, really? And so you fall in line with what he written as a book, or do you feel it's different?
I fall in line with the attitude that there is no way to prove that there is a God, and those things which the pastor sets forth, which I mentioned before, simply don't support the argument. Much of his book is preaching.
And so would you term yourself as an atheist, or how would you describe your faith and what you believe in?
Until I got started on this project, I called myself an agnostic. When I got to the point of having to get down to these arguments, it was pretty clear that I'm an atheist.
An atheist. Just like me. So now, were you always an atheist? Was it pretty much this book that inspired you to want to write about this subject?
Not at all. When I was 5 years old, my mother, for reasons I don't remember, was explaining to me that God created the world, which at that time the world was everything, which led me to ask her immediately, then who created God? And the response was, he's always existed. That had the effect of a clang.
That sounds like the same.
Since then.
Sounds like the same journey I went through, where I was like, this doesn't make any sense logically or physics-wise or science-wise. Yeah.
You get to the argument that the universe is big, complex, incredible, so it must have had a creator.
Yeah.
And my response is then that this God must be bigger, more complex, and more incredible. Where'd he come from?
Exactly.
And that leads to an infinite regress. I didn't click on that at 5, but it's come to me later.
Yeah, I had the same problem. I took a look at what was in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and you look around this world and you see the detail of physics, science, and everything else. And what sort of level of being, of intelligence and development would have to be to create this whole world, this whole universe, really, when it almost seems infinite. We don't know the edges of it, and then that sort of mastermind of Einstein times 310 billion, whatever, right? Mindset. But somehow he's really like a spoiled brat child in the Old Testament, has a bipolar disorder, always is broke, needs money, and he's always killing followers and wiping people off on earth. But he loves you.
Of course, he is kind of a needy guy.
He's kind of needy, and he's certainly got some, he needs to see a therapist. Do you think he could afford one?
He needs to be worshipped.
Yeah, he needs to be worshipped all the time, and he thinks he's always right. But you think, and the other thing too is he's really hyper focused on whether I or you use a swear word today on the podcast or anywhere for that matter. And he's really hyper focused that makes sure that 8 billion people on this planet don't use a swear word or don't do a sin. And you're like, that seems really anal for someone who would operate at that level. And number 2, if they operate at that level of building the universe and maintaining it, where do they get the time? You're like, oh, wait, hold on. I'm getting Bob here swore. Yeah, Bob in Guatemala. All right, put him on the going to hell list because we love him, but fuck him. He's going to go burn in hell forever.
but we still love him, I think, or whatever. Just the nonsensical nature of it and illogical aspect is beyond reason.
And a question that I have is, if God created the universe for the purposes of humanity, why did it take him 14 billion years to get around to it?
He's busy, man. He had to stop at the Sizzler Steakhouse and get a meal and stuff. I always love how, I don't know if you address this in your book, but one of the other quandaries when we talk about what sort of being this might be, assuming there is a being, okay? Assuming there is a being, and he's at this super IQ level where he can just, I don't know, flick a wand and lakes, and there's some snakes and 50 million variations of snakes. You know, he's got the magic hands or something. Wasn't that a Heart song? Anyway, but this being evidently has a gambling addiction. It's because he's always broke. He always needs your money, and you got to pay him money if you want to get to heaven. And the whole thing just makes no sense. It's funny when I hear a lot of religious people talk. I just go, do you sit down and listen to yourself? Because you really should. And it's what you say. They just babble, repeat, parrot the same lines that they hear everywhere else that mean absolutely nothing. You can hear some people in religion tell you something, and you're like, you've talked for half an hour and you've said absolutely nothing of fact, science, or reality that's possible in any way, shape, or form. You're just batshitting, parroting these tomes of, but he loves everyone. But you're going to hell and you're going to burn and suffer and miserable for eternity in hellfire. But he loves you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a kind of weird father figure there going on, man. Who needs some?
There's a passage in the Bible that says that all the names were written in the book before the earth was ever created. So the game was rigged before you started. But a lot of this book is spent by the pastor arguing that there must be a God because he created us in his image and we are special. We humans, we are special. We have a supernatural characteristic, and we are not another animal. He can't stand the idea that humans are not special. And that's part of his argument. Don't take that into court.
Yeah, don't take that into court. So you wrote this as an alternative response to his book, correct?
I spent a lot of my life as a defense lawyer, criminal and civil. So I spent a lot of time deconstructing arguments. And that's what I did here. And I'm not trying to convince people out of their religion, but if for people who are maybe on the fence or just curious and pick up this book, I don't think they should be misled into believing that anything in it is evident. With each of the arguments, the watchmaker argument or the tuned universe argument, I spend time in the book deconstructing those arguments.
And so you break them down. What are some of your favorite arguments that you broke down in the book?
The tuned universe argument is the one that some atheists have said they have a certain amount of difficulty responding to. They shouldn't, because the tuned universe argument is that the universe is full of things like the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force and the weight of the neutron and so forth, that if they hadn't come out exactly this way, the universe couldn't have existed. And there's a couple of things wrong with that. Even if you grant that argument, and the universe was tuned, then it shouldn't have taken 14 billion years to create us. Not only that, we've got 2 trillion galaxies and who knows how many planets in it. What did he need all that for to create us? The other thing is, if you go back to the issue of the Big Bang, which he accepts, by the way. If you go back to the issue of the Big Bang, the question has to arrive, what came before? Okay, that's a difficult question in the sense that time is a feature of the universe. Would it have existed before? But for whatever preceded the Big Bang, who knows what kind of constraints existed at that time? So both ways, the tuned universe does not bother me.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a valid argument in and of itself, and what's going on there. So what did you think Pastor Rice Brooks, is it Brooks, was going on about in his book God's Not Dead? Do you think the whole thing was wholesale just wrong, incorrect, or poor arguments, or how would you characterize it?
Their arguments for theologians. Their arguments for people of the cloth. Their arguments, in his case, straight out of the Bible and straight out of the New Testament and straight out of the Gospels. He's preaching. Okay? That's all very well, but don't quote to me from the Bible because I don't believe a word of it. And I don't see any evidence to support any of it. Now, I will say this, Bart Ehrman, whom I have a great deal of respect for, does believe that Christ, actually his name was Jesus, Christ is a word for Savior or Messiah, that he does believe that Jesus was a historical figure. He does not believe in the resurrection, and he does not believe in the church, which is interesting because he came up as a Baptist and went to his school for an evangelical education and then quit believing it. My point is he believes that Christ was a historical figure, but doesn't buy the rest of it. I have trouble, frankly, with the concept that Christ is a historical figure because it's based on 3 or 4 fragments of writing by other people who existed within a couple hundred years of Christ, but none of them lived at that time. And if you look at the authors who did live at the time of Jesus, you won't find a word about him. You won't find a word about all the miracles that he did for 3 years. Not a word.
Not a word. It's a pretty interesting conversation you brought in. Do you hear back from those folks? Did you send the preach pastor your response to his thing?
I've not heard from the pastor. At one time, I had a website that's a lot better than one I've got now, and I had some back and forth with folks who I loved it. They wanted to argue with me things like the entropy concept and other natural laws, if you will, to which my response always was, those laws can't possibly apply to the creation of the universe because they are entities within the universe. So I had a number of arguments with folks like that. I loved it because they're thinking and they're giving me stuff that is worth coming back on. It's not worth my time to deal with the issue of whether humans are special. And if you think that's the sine qua non for believing in this creator God, go for it. But I think you're badly mistaken.
Roundabout with the book, give people your final pitch out, tell them where they can pick up the book in your .com, and we'll wrap up the show.
Well, the book can be picked up on Amazon. It's in several different editions. I just have republished it under my name as a publisher. It'll be showing up on Amazon in that version with my name, Clifford Summers, on the front of it. That's the most recent version. It's also going up on, oh boy, Barnes and Noble, you name it.
All right.
And,
so good then.
And it'll come up with my other books at the same time.
It's been wonderful to have you on. Very insightful and very good argument for atheists out there, and some things that people who believe in God should think about, because these questions are really valid. It has to logically make sense. If there really was, as far as I'm concerned, if there really was a true God, he would show up. He would be like, right here. Yeah, just mind your manners, be good to each other. I'll come down there and kick your ass. All right? Now be good to each other. And then that would be it. It wouldn't be this weird game that makes no sense. And the only reason it makes sense is because it's a game. And that's my belief. But yeah, everyone's free to believe what they want and all that good stuff. So have fun with that. Just don't share it if you're not right. Thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it, sir. My
apologies for the electronic problems, but I've enjoyed talking to you.
It's been a pleasure to have you, Cliff.
And I enjoy your sense of humor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I enjoy you nailing down these details and asking people the hard questions they need to answer. His book is entitled, Is He or Isn't He? A Response to God's Not Dead by Cliff Summers. And you can pick that up. There'll be a link for it on the Chris Voss Show. Anyway, guys, be sure to support the show. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places in it. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.